What's up guys, Jay's 2 cents here, and it's time for April's Jay What Do You Think? And every single month we host these showcases where we show what our viewer systems and setups look like. We've had some custom modded systems, themed builds, full setup showcases where you show your monitor, keyboard, mouse, desk, chair, the whole deal. And one of the more common requests I get is for people to be shown, or for us to feature, realistic builds. I mean, yeah, it's fun to look at, supercars and hypercars and stuff like that, but most of the time people never have an opportunity to even see those in person, let alone touch one. So to try and do a showcase where we show you guys what is more reminiscent of realistic systems that are out there, I put out a challenge. I said, show us your builds that derive entirely of used components and parts. So that's exactly what we're gonna look at today. Get your next gaming PC from Build Redux. Compare pricing to buying the parts yourself and stop overpaying. Pick your starting budget, see your estimated gaming performance, and then see your PC based on your choices. Plus, Redux offers a growing support hub to answer all your questions. And it's backed by a 2-year parts and labor warranty, so you're covered. Pick your budget, pick your games, and get Build Redux. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the current economy right now, where a lot of used parts are going for the same price they were new because new parts are going for way more expensive than they should. So it's kind of unfortunate that to build a used computer today would cost just as much as building that same computer when it was new. Kind of shows you the challenge here. So if you have new parts in your system, you are kind of disqualified from this. I had a lot of people that were like, well, these parts are used, but these parts are new. Does that disqualify me? Well, I guess if we define the word completely, then yes, you're disqualified. So please follow the directions without us having to go through millions of posts of people that are not following the suggested, well, I guess required rules here to be a part of these themes. But anyway, we found 9 of you that submitted systems that I thought were unique in some way. Phil helped me vet some of these, so some of these are Phil's and some of these are mine. So they are going to kind of range all over the place. Some of these look like at a glance a brand new system, but most of the people told us where they got the parts and how much they ended up spending, which I guess I should have said. I should have said, how much did you spend on this? Because that would have been the neat other metric here to kind of gauge, how this all turned out. But we're gonna start with Jerry here. This is Myers1029 on Twitter. And by the way, be following on Twitter if you guys wanna be a part of these. I get all of these submissions from Twitter and Twitter alone. Even if you follow for nothing more than just to be a part of this, that's how you're gonna be a part of it if you want. Anyway, his system here is a used R3600 or Ryzen 3600, a GTX 1080 for the win, which by the way is still a very powerful card for today's games and such. Some more modern, more cutting edge tech games are gonna probably push a 1080 to its limit, but I digress, you're still gonna be able to play plenty of games. 16 gigabytes of RAM and an open box B550. That was like on the edge right there of being considered not used, by the way, but I guess technically it's used. It wasn't bought privately or third party, but open box. Anyway, slowly upgrading via used parts. You got the orange cable mod cables with the build when he bought it on OfferUp in 2019. So already that was before the crazy price increases and such. Additionally, a work from home setup with a KVM to toggle between work and play. So here's the way the system looks right here. I like the orange themes. That's clearly a Cougar fan in there that matches the orange lighting on the G-Skill RAM, the orange cables. And you know what, I'm gonna just say this. This was one of my favorite eras of EVGA coolers. I just loved how industrial it looked, but it was before all the ugliness that kind of ensued with the cooler designs that sort of subsequently followed this particular generation. The next one after this is when the cooler kind of almost looked like a rib cage, like a weird kind of a ribcagey look. But anyway, I loved this particular era. I still have a couple of these particular cards hanging around here. If we take a look at his setup here, yeah, you can see we got a monitor to the right, monitor in the middle, monitor to the left, laptop in the center. And so he's using a KVM switch. We recently did a video about a monitor that has one built in, allowing you to control keyboard and mouse through the monitor with whatever system the monitor is hooked up to, which is kind of nice, so you can switch back and forth. So that's his work and play setup right there. But this first one here just goes to show a used setup doesn't have to look bad at all. It's got a very nice theme going here. I kind of wish, he said important to note that he bought the GPU when scalping reselling wasn't sky high. So he got $190 for that, or he paid $190 for that 1080. What's a 1080 going for today? I'm gonna look it up right now, hold on. The same exact card he has right there is $330 by it now. $350, so you can see $190 back then was definitely a deal. Okay, so this next one comes to us from Anthony. It's Joker4L on Twitter. He says, all acquired from the Facebook Marketplace. You're a brave man. Ryzen 5 1600 AF, 1600 is fuck. A GTX 970, an Asus B350 ITX motherboard, 246 gigabyte SSD, a 1 terabyte hard drive, 16 gigabytes of G.Skill 3200 RAM, NZXT 210 case, Corsair SP fans. Are those fans used? Anyway, EVGA 450 watt PSU. Wow, he is on the edge with a 450 watt PSU, even with just a GTX 970. All for roughly $500. You can tell by looking at the graphics card that it's older, right? That's definitely a 9 series era or 900 series era graphics card there. It doesn't look bad. You know, they're RGB motherboard and RGB fans. I feel like you should, and the Wraith cooler is also RGB, so I feel like you should at least theme the color of the fans to the case. You have the red trim version of the 210, so I feel like you should just make those lights all red and then it will definitely look better. Unless you just got tired of RGB settings resetting themselves and just leaves it on rainbow puke. I mean, that's a possibility too. We all know how that goes. But yeah, this is another one that at a glance you would look at and just think it was just a straight up modern build. You wouldn't realize that the graphics card is like 5 generations old, 4 generations old technically. That's a first gen Ryzen because the cooler could still totally apply today. For 500 bucks though, we couldn't come close to this today if we tried to build this for $500. All right, moving on. This is Kakosa Production. Hope I said that right. The eBay PC. I love when they name it because you know that means they're proud of it. Again, another build that at first glance you would look at and say there is no way that this is all made from used parts, especially since it's an NZXT cooler with an LCD screen on it. But anyway, GTX 1070, Ryzen 5 5600X, and 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3200. One of the parts, but not their price. So used parts on eBay it was. He spent around 1,100 euros on this. So if you do the conversion, actually the US to Euro conversion is a lot closer than it was right now because of the crazy market, but it's probably around 12 or 1,300 bucks, maybe a little bit more. He cheaped out on the graphics card because I wanted to add a 3080 at MSRP. And that was almost 2 years ago, haha. So you can see it's clearly still running 1070. That's a somewhat expensive build, I think, given the parts, right? It's a 1070 with a 5600X and 32 gigs of DDR4. Doesn't mention whether or not the cooler and all that, and the case and all that was new. Now here's the thing that makes me think that maybe this one's a little bit of a cheat in that I should have disqualified it, but the NZXT AMD motherboard, that is not an old board. That came out like, I think within a year or so. So not entirely used, I don't think. He didn't clarify, but I just wanted to go ahead and put it out there that, hey, this is a complete system. He's up and running, he's gaming right now. With the oldest part being the GTX 1070. So it looks good though. It's all matte black. It's a system that I think Batman himself would be proud to use. It's just all black everywhere with the blue lights on the RAM. But no, it looks pretty good there. Inspiring, right? If you're building your system and you want. I think what happens when a lot of people think buying used parts is they think it's going to end up looking something like what Lord Azix has here. He recently made this office light gaming PC for his girlfriend. Isn't she worth more than this to you? I'm not referring to the parts, I'm referring to the case. This cardboard box, stole her idea. I wanted to do a cardboard box build. I still will. I am like the cardboard smith. We all know this on YouTube. If I'm doing a mod, if I'm doing air conditioning or crazy cooling, cardboard and gaffer's tape is guaranteed to be used in there somewhere. Anyway, he was given an i5 6600K from a friend. That's a good friend. Broken Z170i, bought cheap from eBay, bent pins and corrupted BIOS. I'm assuming he got it working because it's booted here. 16 GO, I think he means 16 gigabytes of RAM. And finally a GTX 1060 bought from a friend. Monitor and keyboard from work. How'd you acquire that from work? Long-term borrow? I worked in IT, I know how to long-term borrow. I'm sure there's a couple things long-term borrowed out of this place I'm not aware of. But anyway, moving on. We've got ourselves keyboard, mouse, monitor, thick ass bezel, but hey, from work, right? And a cardboard box case. I had to showcase this simply because of the fact that it's made out of cardboard. I like the fact that basically you just use the flaps to open it for ventilation and maybe just shut it when you're done. Is that half hanging off the table, sir? Yes, it is. Why do you have the power supply side hanging off the edge? That's the heaviest part, okay? Okie dokie. I do also really like the Philips air conditioner / humidifier with the handlebar mustache. That's a nice little touch right there. So Corey, or Corey J510 says, all used. A Samsung G7 1440p 240 Hz monitor, a Ryzen 9 3900X, 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro, an Aorus X570 Elite, an Asus TUF 3090 Gaming OC, and the full build comes out to $2,100 for everything. There's a couple things happening here. One, you're lying through your teeth. Two, it fell off a truck, and if you guys are foreign, you don't know what that means, that just means stolen. Or three, prefer to one or two. I mean, how? First of all, how do you have a 1440p G7 240 hertz monitor and an RTX 3090 for $2,100? You couldn't get an RTX 3090 for $2,100, period. Even if the markups weren't a thing or used pricing. Because of the fact that the 3090 from the moment it launched never really made it to the hands of anyone for MSRP at $1,500 or $1,600, let alone $2,100 for all of this stuff. So I really wish that he had said where he got all these parts, because or maybe it's a closely guarded secret and he doesn't want everyone to know where he got these parts. Asus TUF 3090s right now are going for $2,400. Was a guy wearing a trench coat and you had to meet in a dark alley? I mean, that's the only way I could see this being the case. You know, it's funny, maybe computers are just becoming like the old adage of, I bought this, 66 Chevelle from a wife divorcing her husband for $5. You know, you ever hear that old joke, that old story? I guess that's got to be the case. All right, anyway, Ray XSU on Twitter says, does having a new case disqualify me? Phil also chose this one. Anyway, moving forward. MSI MPG Gaming Edge Wi-Fi X570, a Ryzen 3800X, an X590 Fatboy. So that's a few generations. That's before RDNA technology for Radeon. But an X590 Fatboy, upgrading to a 6700 XT soon. AMD fanboy. No, I'm just kidding. 32 gigabytes of 3600 CL18 OLOY RAM. What's OLOY RAM? Never heard of it. Monitors and AV setup are all secondhand and new peripherals. Lucky with pricing, he spent a total of $856, including a new case, right? So that's a Be Quiet case right there. I do like the RGB lighting on there. I like that he just kind of went with violet for everything on the colors. It's different. This should technically not be qualified because it's not entirely of used parts or completely of used parts. He has a new fan or a new case and new peripherals. But you can see for $856, he got up and running. I'm curious as to when he built this because, again, if these were built in 2019, that makes sense. If these were built in 2020 or later, these prices are absolutely questionable because it's like, how the heck did you manage it? I also don't, if they are legit, I don't want to necessarily go and feature where they got the parts from because of the fact that other people will just go and buy up all that stuff too. But anyway, it says his previous build was a $50 HP 8300 office tower with an upgrade to an i7-3770, 16 gigabytes of mismatched DDR3 and a 1050 Ti, and an MX500 SSD. I do like the way he's using his Pioneer. Is that Pioneer? I think it's either Pioneer or Onkyo receiver as a monitor stand. Big old tower speakers in front of him, so it's a good setup. It's clean. It all matches. I mean, $856. You can't go wrong with that. So Nathan H on Twitter brings us the kind of stuff I was expecting to see. A 3770, an Acer OEM board and case, 1080 Ti with an OEM CPU cooler, so he's clearly like Haggard it on there as a water cooler. 120 millimeter Corsair AIO, 700 bronze EVGA power supply, and a 120 gigabyte Silicon Power SSD for boot with a 1 terabyte Western Digital hard drive for games. You kind of can't tell where the PC starts and the mess stops. I love it. I actually love the way this looks. I was showing this to Phil. I said, this is just so Haggard together, it looks like a mod in its own right. Like it looks like a Borg PC, right? With all the tubes and parts and stuff hanging off. I particularly, that's a hard word to say. I particularly love the way that the AIO is being held on by the fan cable. He literally has the fan cable just wrapped around the edge and it's what's holding the cooler on. Okay, if it works. I also like the fact that there's like a dremeled out hole on top of the case, but the tube's not long enough for the cooler to fit there, so he kind of just said, screw it. Or maybe it's falling off. I don't know. Either way, I love everything about this. I want to do a build like this now where it's intentionally, we'll just call it the messy build, and be like, how absolutely triggering can we make it? He said he got the case, which by the way, I want to say the word case is being used loosely here. First of all, it's upside down. If you notice at the top, those are the feet. So the case is already upside down. He said he got the CPU, board, and hard drive from his dad's old computer. He bought the SSD and PSU new, only new parts. Well, okay. Apparently I'm the one that can't follow the rules here now. 1080 Ti hybrid SC2 from EVGA was bought used. Pump died and replaced with the old CPU cooler. Yeah, so the hybrid SC, that was the AIO version of the EVGA card back then. I love the fact that he still has a DVI cable hooked up to it. But I love this. I just love the fact that it almost looks like he cut a hole and was like, well, that's not gonna reach, so we'll just literally wedged the cable into a pin on the corner, like one of those little like tabs. He just wedged it in there and we'll just let tension do the rest. All right, Kevin D here. This is retro emulator sleeper build. So obviously this PC has a function, and that is to emulate classic consoles. It's an i7 4770K. It's the first CPU he ever bought, so I'm assuming there's some sentimental value there. An Asus H97M-E, an Asus GTX 680 DCU2. I loved that old DCU2 copper. That's when cooler. So DCU2 was their direct copper unit, or whatever they used to for, I can't remember, but it was when their direct copper pipes were a thing, and that was touching the direct die, and then the copper pipes went up into the cooler and did the rest. That was before it really became mainstream of having copper pipes in your GPUs and such. Of course, there's 16 gigabyte Vengeance Pro, and a modded Asus OEM case, cut a front intake, and a ViewSonic GS790 CRT panel. He says, see the second tweet, he means tweet, to see me put a GTX 1080 and a 1200 watt in there. I love the way that the case looks. This case just has memories as far as I'm concerned, because this goes back to like a simpler time in PC, like not that far after I started YouTube. But it's all matte black. I love that he's got some LED strips in there. I love the fact that he went to town with a Dremel on the front of the case and made an intake fan, but then also took the time to put mesh on the fan so it matches the theme of the front of the case. So it just blends in nicely. It almost looks like it was always intended to be that way. And then, dude, the old school, are those Altec Lansing speakers? No, those might be Harman Kardon. Anyway, beige panel with beige speakers, and a motherboard on display in its old Asus display box. I love that. This entire build just looks like something that is simple. Should have been probably featured in the show us your best practical mods that we did in the past. But if we go ahead and move forward, here he is squeezing the 1080 Strix and a 1200 watt power supply in there. You know, I think that 92 millimeter fan exhaust that you have, the only exhaust with the exception of the power supply, might have its work cut out for it, trying to cool this thing. But anyway, it turned out good. I think the mod looks great, in my opinion. The cable mess in the back though, right there, there's a little bit of work to do there. You can see right here how he did foam around. So there's a gap between the front of the panel on this old case and the intake fan that he put on there. So having that foam around it's gonna seal that up a little bit so the air has no choice but to come through the front. But I love the way he put a grill on there to make it, seamless and look like it belongs part of the case. And once it's all closed up, as you can see, it just looks like the way it should have always been. But I saved what I feel like was the best for last. This comes from that random geeky guy. He says, I made this completely from used parts for my nephew who has very limited space. He's running a 6th gen i5, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and at the time, a 750 Ti. It is a briefcase build, and we've done one of these in the past. We called it our nuclear football because I made it all, like the outside all scarred up and rough and stuff, like it's been passed around, I don't know, some Tom Clancy movie or something. But check this out. He's got a nice piece of plexi that he used in there with 2 of like the but the Amazon RGB fans like we've shown. He's got an intake or exhaust, however it's set up there. He's got a panel in the lid, so when you lift up the lid, it's like a big laptop at this point. And you can see the parts in there, super basic. We've got a hard drive, which by the way, if it's for a kid, you might want to consider changing that hard drive out to an SSD just because this is a portable type of system. If it's running and he moves it and shocks it in any way, that drive could be toast in no time. Basic ITX board, basic graphics card using a riser cable. He's even got like a power supply in there from like a server because of the shape of it. It fits in there nicely. I like how he mounted everything down to a solid piece of wood that then mounted into the case, and then it's all nice and secure. And then it just looks like something that you would be proud to even bring to a LAN party. So I think it's pretty awesome. This all-in-one build he made out of just like a regular, almost looks like a makeup case technically. You get these kinds of cases at like Harbor Freight cheap hardware store would have this type of stuff. So anyway, that is it for this month's Jay, what do you think? As I mentioned, we feature Twitter builds on here because they're the easiest for us to go and find the photos. We use a hashtag, you reply to the hashtag, and you insert your photos and you give us a description on there. This month's was designed to give some inspiration to those that might be trying to complete their builds and are not comfortable with the idea of used parts. You can see here, all of these systems featured used main components at the very least to get their systems up and running. And they can be everything from that Borg looking mess to this awesome Minecraft themed custom briefcase build. Again, using modified parts. Fun fact, most of the modding community for the longest time, when they would do their crazy mods of like that Master Chief bust that was at Computex one year, and a lot of these really crazy builds that take months or years to do with all custom fabrication, more often than not featured old parts, because by the time they were done with the build, the parts became old. It's kind of like the way I do my builds around here. I'm just slow. But anyway, if this inspired you in some way, give this video a like, and maybe you should go and give your favorite one featured here on Twitter, maybe a thumb up, or tell them you like their build. And if you have any more questions, you can ask them about their systems there. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and of course, we'll see you in the next one.